Hello, guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This will be part 227. So, this is where we take a look at some of the mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity we share our world with. So, today we've got quite an interesting assortment. A few more birds today, so there's been a big influx of birds, which has been really cool. But we've also got some other extinct animals too, and another subspecies of the mountain zebra this time, so that'd be quite cool. So let's get stuck into it. So we're going to be starting off with the duck again. This time we've got the mottled duck. So let's have a look at these guys over here. So this is the mottled duck, or Anas fulgula, or also called the mottled mallard. So these guys are a medium-sized species of dabbling duck and an intermediate in appearance between a female mallard and the American black duck, and is some closely related to the species and sometimes even considered a subspecies of American black duck, but at the moment it is considered its own species. So there are two distinct subspecies of the mottled duck, with the one species being the Musculata, the Gulf Coast mottled duck that lives along the Gulf of Mexico, between Alabama and Mexico, outside the breeding season, and the Florida mottled duck, which lives in central and southern Florida and occasionally north Georgia. And they do actually share the similar population kind of distribution with the local sandhill cranes, and individuals of both subspecies have been introduced to South Carolina, and they have mixed ancestry there. So the adult duck, as you can see here, the adult mottled duck, is about 44 to 61 centimeters or 17 to 24 inches long from head to tail. It has a dark body, lighter head and neck, orange legs, and dark eyes. Both sexes have a shiny green-blue speculum or wing patch, as you're going to see there, which is not bordered with white as in the mallard, so it's just kind of white, green and black there. Males and females are pretty similar, but the male's bill is bright yellow, where the female's is a deep kind of orange colour, so not too different there. Occasionally lined with black spotches near the edge. So that one's I believe that's a male. So you can see there's a male and female there. Perfect comparison. So whatever got you there, miss. The plumage is typically darker in the female mallards, especially in the tail, and the bill is yellower, with the white end border of the speculum difference. The American black duck is darker than most mottled ducks and has a wing patch that's more purple than blue, so you can tell the two species apart. And the behavior and voice are pretty much the same as mallards. So these guys feed by dabbling in shallow water and grazing on land. They mainly eat plants, but also eat some mollusks and aquatic insects. And these ducks are fairly common within their restricted range, and they're resident all year round and don't really migrate. Their breeding habitats tend to be brackish or intermediate coastal marshes, but also we use human-developed habitat, such as retaining pools, water impoundments, and agricultural land during the breeding season. And according to a review of their breeding behaviours, mottled ducks may may be found in pastures, levees, dry cordgrass masses, cutgrass mass, spoil banks, and small islands. It's quite a variety there. So in terms of their lengths, we do have their lengths here. So they have a body length for males of about 19 to 22 inches, or about 50 to 57 centimeters. They weigh between 30 to 43 ounces, or between 180 to 1200 grams, and a wingspan of about 32 to 34 inches, and about 83 to 87 centimeters. The female is a little bit smaller, about 47 to 53 centimeters, or about 18 to 21 inches. 24 to 40 grams or 40 ounces, or 700 to 1500 grams for a female, and their wingspan is typically 31 to 32 or 80 to 80 to 83 centimeters in length. So that's kind of how you tell them apart in the different sizes and things. So as I mentioned, there is the Florida population. So there's the Florida that lives in Tampa, which is a dominant subspecies. And then the mottled one, the Mescala, lives around like the Gulf, or typically around there. And their ranges do not overlap, but they can be confused with female mallards and black ducks. DNA does suggest, though, that they are derived from ancestral black ducks, being far more distantly related to mallards than the two subspecies, a consequence of their kind of limited range and the non-migratory habits. They all belong to that mallard clade of ducks, and they could all produce fertile hybrids. And there's always been limited to extent, there may be hybrids, with American black ducks or mallards, which would colonize North America later. So the mallard came in later, and the American black duck and mottled duck were here before, and then the mallard came around. With this resultant gene flow, there's no cause of immediate concern, but habitat destruction and excessive hunting could eventually reduce the species to the point where hybridization would actually threaten to make it distinct. And this especially appears in the Florida mottled duck, which has a small range and does face rapid habitat destruction due to urbanization, and that could cause a decline in the population to the point where hunting would have been restricted or prohibited. At present, they seem to be holding on though. There's a population of about 50 to 70,000 of these individuals here, and while hybridization is common, because there's enough of them, that's kind of diluted. But if one species is getting really rare, hybridization would really become an impact. But typically, there's enough to kind of spread out the hybridization around there. So yeah, really, really cool species. And we're going to have a look at the cute little ducklings. Very, very cute. Let's see, we're going to have a look at the Zoopedia, see if we missed out anything. Looks like a cross between a female and a cross between both. Mention that. 1 in 20 mottled ducks are mounted, making them one of the most frequently banded waterfowl species. And they're both fine for birders and hunters. We already kind of mentioned bill colour, and we already mentioned that as well. So, yeah, very, very cool. Another great one, Lorby. Done a good job. So next up, we've got one by Great Cakes Mods. So we've got here the swallow-tailed gull. So this is a very interesting one here. The swallow-tailed gull is an equatorial seabird, so is in the gull family, and the only species in the genus Cerugis, which comes from Latin cerugis, which means butcher, and Cerugis means meat, so it refers to hook of meat, referring to its quite hooked bill that you see there. It was first described by French naturalist and surgeon Adolphine Simon Nebonx in 1846, and its scientific name refers from gull, which is kind of Glaros, and Loris is gull, so basically Fulca, so the two-tined gull, and it's been most of its life flying and hunting over the open ocean, with its main breeding location being in the Galapagos, particularly around the rocky shores and Clough of Hood, Tower, and Wolf Islands, with lower numbers on most of the other islands, and they're more common on the eastern islands where it's a little bit warmer. They're also the only fully nocturnal gull species in the world, preying on squid and small fish, which rise to the surface at night to feed on plankton. So that's quite interesting as well. The swallowtail gull has no structural or plumage differences between the males and females, and in the breeding season, the adult has kind of a black plumaged head and a bright fleshy rim around its eyes, you can kind of see there. Outside the breeding season, the head is white and the eye rim becomes black. There's a greyish upper breast, grey mantle on black wingtips, and the black bill, as you can see, always has this white tip here. So as I mentioned, they do have a night vision, so when hunting for food at night, their eyes are larger in size and volume than those of other gull species. And they also have a temptum lucidum, which allows them to reflect the light back into the retina as well. And there's actually a study in melatonin levels in black-billed gulls, so they have no measurable daily melatonin rhythm. Whether a day-feeding gull that was close in comparison had higher melatonin of day-level activity. High melatonin levels make birds sleepy, and this actually means they probably don't get sleepy like they still need to sleep, but they don't get sleepy like other animals do. So that's quite interesting as well. So it actually doesn't have anything about their size or anything on here. So let's have a quick look on the Zoopedia. This should probably have their size. Average size, let's see, 51 to 57 centimeters long, 12 to 15 years, and only about 700 grams. It's probably as big as they'll get. Alright, we'll carry on. So distribution, as I mentioned, they're a near-endemic seabird of the Galapagos Islands. There's a few pairs living on a coast of Colombia. While not breeding, it is totally pelagic, so lives over the open oceans and migrates eastwards to the coasts of Ecuador and Peru. So as I mentioned, they are unique among gulls as they only feed at night, mostly on fish and squid that rise to the surface to feed on plankton. They leave the colony at the flock at dusk, and which is a great deal of screaming and display. So in terms, calls of the displays are quite different from other gulls, mostly resembling the vocalizations of a Salbus gull or the black-legged killiwake. And the loudest, most commonly heard call is an alarm call, which is kill and rasp and stuff like that, so they make a lot of interesting calls. So these guys typically will start breeding at about 5 years of age, with pairs frequently staying together from year to year. And most birds throughout the year are in mixed colonies, on the cliffs of the Galapagos or sometimes in flat areas. And the food young is hunted by the seas from the seas near the nesting colonies. The nest is made of a small platform on a cliff, usually less than 10 meters above sea level, by covering the rocky ground with small pieces of lava, white coral, or sea urchin spines, which prevents the egg from rolling. Nesting birds tend to face the cliff, a habit common among exclusively cliff nesting gulls, such as the black-legged kittiwake. And they usually weigh one speckled egg per breeding attempt, and they're asynchronous breeders, so they can breed any time of the year, and they follow a 9-month cycle, or less if egg or chick is unsuccessful. The egg generally incubates for about 31 to 34 days, and the chick takes its first flight about 60 to 70 days, and is fed by the adults until it's about 90 days old. And I keep forgetting we have juvenile there, so that's kind of its first sort of colours there. Why is it not working? There you go. There we go. And when it leaves land, possibly adults on the seas. And they're estimated to be threatened. They're not thought to be threatened, but they haven't really estimated their populations. It seems to have been about 35,000 of them left since 2006. So yeah, very interesting species there. We can keep their size. So yeah, 50 to 61 centimeters on average, also 610 to 780 grams, and a wingspan of 124 to 139 centimeters. That's kind of that information there that they needed. Alright. So next up, we've got another cool species here. So that, as I mentioned, that is the swallowtail gull done by Great Cakes Mod. Next up is the pied avocet by a new modder, Elisa Planet Zoo, I believe you say that, or Liza. It's Elesser, Eliza, or something like that. But yeah, it's a really, really cool. Nice to see some new modders coming on the scene, even this late in the game, and giving us some really funky birds. So these guys are very, very interesting. They reach to about 42 to 45 centimeters, or centimeters long. They get between 195 to 397 grams, and have a wingspan of about 77 to 80 centimeters. And they are pretty much mostly white, except for these kind of, black cap on their forehead, and then one on a couple of lines, the primaries and stuff are black as well, and a couple of little black bits on the tail there. And they also have this very charismatic kind of like curved beak that's strongly curved upwards. And they've also got these kind of grey legs. And there's not much in terms of like seasonal variability or juveniles as well. Well, juveniles, you can see there have got the typical mottled pattern of seabirds. So they are considered monotypic, so there's no different subspecies, and they have a wide distribution. So they're found in Europe throughout Western and Central Asia to southeastern Siberia and northeastern China, and then locally throughout North Africa to even South Africa and Arabian Peninsula into northwestern India. They're also found in winters in Western Europe and Africa, through the Middle East into India, Myanmar, and southeastern China. So quite a wide range there. So that's very, very interesting in terms of their range. So in terms of their general habits or general habitat, they breed in flat, open areas, typically in shallow saline lakes, lagoons, pools, salt pans, and estuaries with sparse vegetation, and they can live over 300 meters in Afghanistan. Outside breeding season, though, they tend to frequent muddy tidal flats. They're frequently found in freshwater lakes near rivers, and sometimes even on agricultural lands such as rice stubble, which is quite funny as well. So in terms of their movements migration, they tend to be quite variable with their movements. Temperate birds may migrate around August to April to October to tropical and warm temperate regions in large numbers, where roughly 1/3 of the Atlantic seaboard population migrates to sub-Saharan Africa, with a mean of 10,000 birds plus each wintering in France and Iberian Peninsula. So they do, depending on the local populations, there's a lot of, some of the more northern populations will migrate south, but for the most part, some of the more kind of other birds, some local overwintering populations. So some populations do kind of stay around, but for the most part, they do kind of migrate around the place. And they can be found pretty much all over the place. So in terms of diets and foraging, they're carnivorous. They take a great variety of marine invertebrates that are between 4 and 15 millimeters long, particularly like aquatic insects, crustaceans, worms, rarely mollusks, fish, and sometimes even plant material. So they eat lots of worms and little things like that. And how they feed is typically they use it by scything the bill through water. So they scythe the bill, you know how like you scythe with a big scythe So they move their bill through the water, looking for stuff through water and mud. Sometimes feed communally or occasionally in compact groups as well. But other northern conditions, they sweep through water at about 28 sweeps per minute to try and find food. So most frequent calls and stuff that you typically hear, they have a continuous repeat of like mellow call, like kulu or kult, kind of different calls and things like that. And in terms of breeding, they typically breed in Eurasia between April to August, and in January, April, and June, July in Eastern Africa. So it just depends on the kind of local areas. They breed in typically the summer of those local areas. They are seasonally monogamous, with pair bonds apparently forming in late winter prior to arrival on breeding season. And they usually nest in large colonies, sometimes with black wing stilts, which is fun as well, especially on dense islands where nests can be less than a metre apart. And the nests are typically a grass-lined scrape, which can be about 11 to 13 millimeters wide by 25 to 40 millimeters deep, and sometimes with a raised rim to kind of, lined with feathers as well, in open ground. And then they usually lay about 3 to 4 eggs that are kind of brown and spotted, and then lay them as well. So incubation for these guys is normally about 23 to 25 days, and they're incubated by both sexes. And this in the down with the young, you can see the down here. They've got almost like a silver grey on grading on the head, and then white on the bottom. So it kind of helps with hiding in the undergrowth. And typically they'll fledge at about 32 to 42 days, with young sometimes actually gathering in creches, typically tended by adults as well. So then they kind of do that as well. So that's kind of how they do it. Often they will lose nests to flooding, but also they'll be prey for red foxes, rats, feral dogs, and different species of gulls and ravens as well. And it's estimated they have a hatching kind of rate of about 22% in Europe. So typically that works as well. And fledging occurs higher in wet years over the dry years, and they typically, once they fledge, as I mentioned, 42 days old, they'll breed first at about 22 or 3 years, and then they can live up to 24 years in the wild. So that's quite interesting as well. So in terms of conservation, they're not globally threatened, with an extensive range, but previously more than half the population reckoned to breed in Europe, locally abundant in Africa, but also, they're also exclusively some local residents in South Africa. Very large numbers live in Eastern Africa. Europe is believed to hold about 56,000 breeding pairs, and with the largest populations being in the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. Some other smaller populations around the place. More than 70,000 individuals breeding counted in non-breeding season in China, and they actually seem to be recolonizing England as well, with about 2,000 pairs in the second decade of the 21st century. So they are coming back to Europe as England as well. But overall, they're doing quite well. But they are threatened by the lack of protection of wetlands, both on inland breeding grounds and wintering grounds in coastal China as well. Some populations exist, because of the destruction of the wetlands, because they do rely on wetlands to, live. But there's also, like issues like that. But there have been some recoveries, especially places like Britain and Germany and Denmark. But with all wetland habitats, they are susceptible to insecticides, lead poisoning, and things like that. But good management of, these kind of wetlands and stuff like that does mean their population's doing okay, and not threatened by building or anything. Just these wetlands are quite important to protect for the species. Yeah, very, very cool. Definitely a big fan of that. I really do like that. So let's carry on there. So next up we've got the Bornean tiger. So let's have a look at the Bornean tiger. So the Bornean tiger. This one is done by Sky Polaris. This one's a really cool one here. So this is an extinct tiger population that lived in Borneo in prehistoric times. And there have been 2 bone fragments that suggest that the tiger was certainly present in Borneo to the late Pleistocene, but there has never been a live Bornean tiger recorded. So very interesting as well. So as of 2021, only 2 specimens were confirmed to be definitive late Pleistocene fossil records of Bornean tigers, with the first specimen reported from 2007 was a metacarpal bone from a young tiger that dated to about 13,000 years ago, and then the second specimen was found in 2021, it was a partial mandible that came from a large tiger that lived about 22,000 years ago. So archaeological evidence also produced an upper canine and a navicola of a tiger between 10,000 and 3,000 years ago. So they were likely in Borneo in the late Pleistocene to the Holocene. And that's typically because there was also found in Philippine Islands as well. They think it's unlikely that they were traded to different regions, and 2 fossil bones have also been found in the Philippines that have been identified to be a tiger. So it's believed that Borneo might have been connected to the Philippines during the glacial periods, justifying the molecular phylogeneity of the mice in the area since they seem to be related. And tiger parts are actually commonly used as amulets in South and Southeast Asia, so it's possible the tiger parts could have been imported from elsewhere. And it is also possible that they crossed the strait because, during the Ice Ages, the Sundaland was kind of a big area that was all connected. They could have potentially just walked there during the Pleistocene between 420 to 620,000 years ago, where the distance of Borneo and Palawan would have been shorter. During this period, the sea levels were a lot lower, but there's no evidence of tigers living in the Philippines or kind of beyond 12,000 years. But there has been some alleged records, there has been some claims of seeing tigers in these areas, but they could have been either escaped, animals, or heard a tiger roar, people just not knowing. But they actually, the Bornean tiger was considered to be a bit smaller than other populations. The native people said it was bigger than a clouded leopard, as big as a Sumatran tiger, and typically a large brown thing, and they would have preyed on animals such as Bornean bearded pigs, sambar deer, and muskrat as well. So yeah, very interesting kind of population there. There was definitely tigers in Borneo, at least during 3,000 years ago, potentially, because we do have physical evidence of it. We've got to look at this cute little tugru. How can I love a cute little tugru? Anyway, that's another Sky Polaris mod. Next up, we have got a mod done by Great Cakes. This is another extinct animal, so a really, really cool one. So we get to talk about this. So this is Pundula darwini. So this is actually an extinct species of stem pinniped. So it's an early seal that lived during the Miocene between 21 and 24 million years ago. So, being about a meter long, it only had minimal physical adaptations for swimming, and unlike modern pinnipeds, it did not have flippers, and was actually a lot more kind of otter-like, albeit more specialized, with the skull and teeth that features the most clearly indicate it was a type of seal. So you can kind of see the seal look on its face as well. It is considered to be the most primitive pinnipedomorph yet found, and the genus name is an Inuktitut word for young seal, and the species name honors Charles Darwin, and the holotype and only known specimen is a nearly complete fossil that was found in the Hachulon Formation on Devon Island in the High Canadian Arctic, and the specimen itself is housed in the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa, Ontario. So yeah, very interesting there. We'll see if we can get one swimming. Let's see if we can get swimming, and then we'll have a look at the baby. Are there any of them swimming? I feel like they're all hiding. Oh yeah, they're all up the top there. We'll have a look at you because you look like you're in for a swim. So as I mentioned, a semi-aquatic carnivore that represents a morphological link from early pinniped evolution. It shows quite enlarged, possibly webbed, as it's been interpreted, feet, robust forelimbs, and an unspecialized tail. It's suggested that the Pundula swam quadrupedally, using its webbed fore and hindlimbs for propulsion. And phylogenetic studies indicated by molecular evidence suggest a sister relationship between seals, bears, and mustelids, so things like weasels and otters and stuff like that. It had been popularly assumed that land mammals at some point transitioned to be more marine, essentially returning to the sea in order to gain some survival advantage. However, fossil evidence of this transition had been weak or contentious, and the discovery of this genus, Peluga, is important as it represents that morphological link in early seal evolution, and one that morphologically predates some more familiar genus like Elanoarctos, despite being younger. In other words, it is pretty much considered a transitional fossil. It's almost like the Archaeopteryx of seals, or the the Archaeopteryx of seals, or the Moatherium of seals. It gives us an idea of what early relatives of modern seals and seals and sea lions and walruses would have been like. So it's very important in that regard. So in terms of its discovery, it was discovered in 2007 by Natalia Roshoneski and her team using surface collection and screening at the early Miocene lake deposits of Yangtze Formation in Devon Island in Canada. The paleobotanical record suggests this environment was kind of a forest community transitioning between a boreal and a conifer hard forest, and a cool, temperate coastal area with moderate winters, so it was likely a lot warmer back then. This is also the first mammalian carnivore found from these lake deposits, and this is an indication that potentially the entire Pinniped clade may have originated from the Arctic. The initial find is credited to field assistant Elizabeth Roth and partially made of luck. She had unexpectedly stranded the team's ATV, which had run out of fuel several kilometers from base camp. The brain case was discovered a year later on the first day on the 2008 field expedition by Martin Limperman, who was the team's photographer. So a really, really cool kind of, early transitional species. And we're going to get a good look at it swimming. Let's see if we can have a look one there. But they're definitely having a good job swimming around. So we better have a look. So yeah, that's why we believe, very different animals as well. So likely would have been swimming around, kind of like that. Very, very cool to see these guys. Do really love to see, some of these early animals getting some love, because Great Cakes does a great job with some of these early species. And we got to have a look at the baby. Why not have a look at the little baby? Very, very cute. So actually, did I turn the things off? I'll turn that off just to make sure we don't get any. Just check. Oh, sweet. We're fine. Just want to make sure no one grew up on us. That's fine. We'll also have a look at the Zoopedia. See, the most primitive, yeah, we already covered all that stuff. So, cool. Next up, this is another great one done by Great Cakes. Next up, we've got the Hartmann's zebra. So, very, very cool one there. The Hartmann's mountain zebra. So, this is a subspecies of the mountain zebra. So, there are two different subspecies of the mountain zebra. There's the Hartmann and the Capes. So the Cape one lives around South Africa, and the Hartmann's lives as far southwest in Angola and western Namibia. And it's easy to distinguish from other similar species because of its dewlap and the lack of stripes on its belly. So these guys are actually quite agile climbers and able to live in arid conditions in steep mountainous country, hence it's called the mountain zebra, almost like it's purposeful. So Hartmann's mountain zebra prefer to live in small groups, ranging from as little as 3 individuals to as many as 12. Herds are either seen, will either be a breeding herd comprising of one stallion and potentially many mares, or be a potential group of young males. Young males raised as foals within the breeding herds are generally kicked out when they're about as 24 months old, whether they may become the stallion of their own breeding herds within 5 years. When two breeding herds come into contact with each other, each representative stallion will engage with each other in elaborate postural kind of rituals. So these guys are also quite important ecosystem engineers. So while engaging in the kind of dust baths that they do, they create a permanent depression in the ground, such as a rolling pit. And even after they abandon this pit, it can actually remain visible for many years. And the rolling pits actually create a really cool favorite microsite for dense, native vegetation, which leads to denser growth throughout the pit. So these guys are actually considered ecosystem engineers, which is quite interesting there. Let's have a look at you there, big boy. So in terms of their description, the Hartmann's zebra, as you can see, has that defining dewlap hanging from their throat. And they're stripped all the way down to the hooves and white belly. Where there's some other similar-looking mountain zebra species only have stripes down the knees and a completely white belly. So that's kind of the Cape mountain zebra. The Hartmann's mountain zebra has a guerdon of narrow stripes along the back, small dewlap under the chin, and no shadow stripes. They're very good climbers and have very hard and pointed hooves. They are in the horse family equids and related common zebras, and although their subspecies status, they're doing better than the Cape mountain zebra in South Africa, they are still considered vulnerable. They are managed by the International Stud Books of Art and Mountain Zebra. They've already gone with their school climbers and hard to kind of keep there. They're also known to be quite playful compared to the other zebras. And they have sometimes been suggested to be their own species. The Hartmann zebra and the Cape zebra are thought to be different species, but it's no longer really supported by genetic evidence. And they're no longer considered separate species either. So they are considered vulnerable. They are threatened. So mountain zebras in general, are kind of considered threatened. So the main threats they sort of face is loss of agriculture and hunting and prosecution, and that has decreased the numbers quite a bit. And the populations, the Cape Mountain zebra, as I mentioned, there's only a few thousand of them left. And I don't know how well these guys are doing, slightly better though, which is interesting. Yeah, let's go back. So this is the, Hartmann's Mountain Zebra. Let's have a look at the cute little foal, because it's a good have a look at the cute little foal. You keep doing this to me. It's going to be one of those days. That's alright. Look at this cute little guy. Very, very cute. Alright. Next up, we're going to be moving on to our last species. This is by TNT. This mod has been, TNT and Leaf. This mod has been a very long time coming. So I'm very excited to have a look at this one. So this one, has been a long, long time coming. It's been a couple of years now. But we finally have it. This is TNT's Velociraptor mongoliensis. Or as he puts it in the game, the Mongolian Velociraptor. So Velociraptor almost needs no introduction. So these guys are a small genus of Dromaeosaur that comes from Asia during the late Cretaceous, from about 75 to 71 million years ago. There are two species currently described, even though there's been others in the past. The one that we're looking at here is Velociraptor mongoliensis, which is the type species, which is found in the Djota Formation in Mongolia. So, history of discovery. During the American Museum Natural History expedition on the Flaming Cliffs around the Djota in 1923, Peter Kazan discovered the first Velociraptor fossil, which was a crushed but complete skull, along with some claws and stuff like that. And in 1924, paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn designated the skull as a type species of a new genus, Velociraptor. And Velociraptor, I'm sure you Jurassic Park fans will know, means swift robber or plunderer. So it's the swift robber or the swift plunderer. It refers to the animal's cursorial nature and also its carnivorous diet. They named the type species Mongoliensis from its country of origin, and earlier that year they had informally mentioned an animal in a popular press under the name Oviraptor jetavolti, not Oviraptor, not Ovoraptor, but eventually changed it to Velociraptor mongoliensis, which is, in my opinion, a much better name. So while North American teams were shut down over communist Mongolia during the Cold War, they actually found several more specimens, including the very famous fighting dinosaur specimen that was found in 1971, which preserves a Velociraptor fighting against a Triceratops, which is very interesting as well. And there was one now species, Shuri Devi, which was considered a Mongoliensis, but now its own genus. And then there's another juvenile Velociraptor specimen that is now considered its own species as well. So there's been quite a few different specimens found of Mongoliensis. And there are additional species. There's believed to be one unnamed species and Omazki, but I'm not going to get into them. We're focusing on the Mongolian one here because, that's what that specifically is. So Velociraptor was a small to medium-sized dromaeosaurid, with adults reaching between 1.5 to 2 meters long, between 4'9" and 6'8", so quite a long boy there, and approximately about half a meter or 1.6 feet tall at the shoulder, and weighed between 14 and 19 kilograms or 31 to 43 pounds. So we know these guys are quite prominently feathered, so they have prominent quill knobs on the arms of the ulna of a single Velociraptor specimen, which was an animal estimated to be about 5 feet long and 15 kilos. So these quill knobs were preserved on the ulna, and that suggests that they definitely had feathers, like a lot of its relatives as well. And there is, even if you did ignore that evidence, there is strong phylogenetic evidence because of a lot of its close relatives, such as Microraptor, Danulong, and Zhangulong, all had feathers. So why wouldn't this guy have feathers? So, Jurassic Park didn't do the best job representing the species, as we'll get into. So the skull is actually quite long, and it is about 23 centimeters, or about 9.1 inches long, and has a unique, upcurved region of the snout, and concave on the upper surface as well. So a very, very long snout. Which is very interesting as well. Very charismatic kind of skull. The teeth of Velociraptor are also kind of home. What was that? Oh, that was fun. Kind of gave you a fright there. It was fairly homodont and kind of equal in shape, with several dentitions and serrations and things like that as well. So very charismatic teeth, and not too different in anatomy from other dromaeosaurids. But one of the cool features that these guys, of course, have is their digits. They have a small dew claw as well on their hands as well. And On their feet, they have that little sickle claw, which is the second digit. Oh, that's quite cute, kicking around. They have that second digit as well, which is Velociraptor most famous, is highly modified and held off the ground. And that caused them to kind of walk with, the one digit held high like that classic sickle claw, And it's something seen in both other Dromaeosaurids and Troodontids. And this large claw was estimated to be about 6 centimeters or about 2 inches long on the outer edge, and was most likely used for, restraining prey or getting right into the throat as well. So as you mentioned as well, Velociraptor is a member of the group Eurodromaeosauria, so it's a pretty derived group of the larger family Dromaeosauria, and within its own family, the Velociraptorinae. So it is its own member. It's most likely its closest relatives are the Dromaeosaurians, so things like Dromaeosaurus and Utahraptor. But in its own family, it has animals such as Velociraptor, Siri, Bella, and Adasaurus and Kuru, also Deinonychus as well. So quite a few different relatives in there. That's where it fits in. And there's been a few species that were considered Velociraptor, like Shiri and Kuri as well, that were all, or Kuru, which were all considered Velociraptor, but they had their own things. But as you mentioned, we did have the presence of the quill knobs, so they did definitely have feathers. And while they did argue because it was larger, they may have, lost its feathers, but they did have the quill knobs, which are found in pretty much all flightless birds today, ostriches, even though they're quite large, they still have quill knobs. So it's likely that these guys either were most definitely flightless, but they still had feathers and may have used them either to keep warm or stuff like that. So the studies as well looked into their senses and found that they actually have a wide, good range of hearing as well. And the endocranium suggests these guys would have been agile, swift predators, as you could tell by everything else about it. And fossil evidence actually suggests that these guys would have scavenged and would have been opportunistic and actively predatory, feeding and carrion when they need, but also, hunting quite a bit. In terms of feeding as well, so let's have a look in terms of feeding. Looking at their teeth, these guys kind of have quite a long snout and a bit more selective feeding, so these guys would have been adapted for smaller, faster prey as well. But also, as you mentioned, there's the fighting dinosaurs that exist, so they eat animals like Protoceratops, something that's at their size or potentially twice their size, even more. So that's quite fun there. As you mentioned, you've got the fighting dinosaurs. And that would have been preserved in a sandstorm. And it was hypothesized that they drowned under the stand in the sandstorm as well. And there is lots of evidence that, looking at the rings and stuff, they suggest that Velociraptor may have been nocturnal, and while Protoceratops would have been active, like short parts from gicanthermal. So these guys would have been, potentially nocturnal species. The distinctive claw had traditionally been, used to suggest, disembowel prey. The fighting dinosaur specimen, they actually see the specific claw in the throat, suggests they may have been used to pierce the vital organs of the throat, like the jugular vein, or the carotid artery, or the trachea, rather than slashing at the abdomen. And they actually did a documentary where they tested this hypothesis and created an artificial leg, and the sickle claw was unable to tear and was unable to disembowel prey, but they definitely used it to kind of stick around either to hold onto the prey or try and aim for soft parts like the neck and stuff to try and, disembowel it. Remains of other close relatives as well suggest they may have been pack hunters, but there's really not much evidence that suggests they were truly pack hunters. They haven't found multiple velociraptors together. It's definitely possible, we just don't really know. It is depicted obviously in media as being a pack hunter, but we really don't know. Likely would have been solitary. But we believe that, as there's fossil footprints and stuff suggest they could be moving together in groups, but whether they're hunted together, we don't really know. It's kind of all speculation at that point. And one thing as well, they actually suggested that Velociraptor may have actually captured their prey using RPR, or raptor prey restraint, which is a way of that modern birds of prey tend to kill prey. And they would have kind of leapt on it, pin it down under its body weight, and kind of grip on it with its claws. And they would have proposed they would have done that while they're still alive, and kind of done that as well. So they would have been very similar to that of hawks as well, to do that as well. So they would have been able to jump down on prey and things like that. So quite cool as well. And of course, we do have a lot of evidence of scavenging behavior, because most animals will scavenge when they get the chance. So they found evidence of one just scavenging on a Protoceratops, and even found one with a pterosaur pterosaur, a Starker pterosaur with a longbone in their gut as well. And even a study looking at their kind of bite forces suggests that more kind of bulky animals such as Dromaeosaurus and Deinonychus would have had much higher bite forces, compared to other species. And it was later theorized that these guys would have been obtaining food potentially more scavenging more than open predations in Velociraptor. So they would have been resistant, very strong jaws, able to hunt better than some of those other species. And like these other guys, there would have been that metabolism. So these guys were definitely warm-blooded to some degree, very bird-like, though they may have been more similar to, things like even the kiwi. The kiwi, which is actually the North Island brown kiwi in the game, is actually the base rig for this guy, which fits really well. The kiwi has a much lower body temperature than a lot of other birds do. I know this because I work at a kiwi house. I work with kiwi. And they're quite similar to Dromaeosaurus, a lot of anatomy and bone structure, stuff like that, and would have, potentially would have been a great model for the metabolism of primitive birds and Dromaeosaurs. Though in 2023, they actually examined the nasal cavity of ectotherms and endotherms, or cold or warm-blooded animals, and to try and evaluate non-avian dinosaurs, and they found that taxa, like these guys of Velociraptor, would have been recovered below extant ectotherms as well, but they would have, been ectotherm in some way. And there is some pathologies. There is some reports of Mongoliensis with bites from other velociraptors, so they would have been fighting, and there's no evidence of healing, so this would have been killed by an individual potentially. And it was actually found, as I mentioned, there was another injured velociraptor specimen with the bones of a starkid within its stomach cavity, which suggests it may have been injured potentially as well. But the habitats are sort of lived in. Mongoliensis lived in the Jota Formation in the Mongolian province that lived between 70 to 71 million years ago. We'll have a look at the cute little babies while we talk about that. So it would have lived with all sorts of really cool animals, and at this time it would have been kind of a lot of sand dunes and semi-arid climate. Lived with Oviraptor, Psontosaurus, which is a type of ankylosaur, also Protoceratops, and Saurornitholestes, a troodontid, birds, and Orchithodontic violets as well. So very rich kind of formation there. Which is very interesting as well. But you guys probably know these guys from Jurassic Park, of course, Jurassic Park. So it was it's now commonly perceived as a vicious and cunning predator because of Jurassic Park. But the ones Jurassic Parks have based a lot more on Deinonychus, which was larger, and then eventually, retroactively kind of thought to fit Utahraptor, which is quite fun as well. So a lot of that, how people see Velociraptor is very much wrong. It's much smaller, much longer skull, much more feathered than the Velociraptors of Jurassic Park as well. Let's see there. Jurassic Park and production, as I mentioned there. And in Jurassic World 3, they were given quills, but they don't really have that. But the Pyroraptor in Jurassic World Dominion had feathers as well, and tried to do that, but didn't look very good. But yeah, this is what the real Velociraptor looks like, not the Jurassic Park one. Yeah, very, very cool. I do quite like that one. So yeah, I'm going to thank everyone today. So thank you for these lovely mods. Thank you, Lorby, for the duck. Thank you, Great Cakes, for the early seal and the gull. Thank you, Sky Polaris, for the mountain zebra subspecies, the Hartmans, and the Bornean tiger. We've also got that new modder, Elsier, for the pied avocet. That's really, really cool that you managed to, we get some new modders even this late in the game. So I'm really excited to see what other birds and stuff you make. And we've also got TNT giving us that Mongolian Velociraptor. So really, really awesome to see these kind of mods coming out. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. See if you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.